Holy Saturday. E te iwi tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou I roto I tēnei pō. Kia ora everybody, it's Che Wilson here from Te Pai Pai Waho, connecting you to you tonight through a range of different platforms. And our kaupapa for tonight is a continuation of how we navigate Tangihanga through the different alert levels. But this time, the learnings I got from being part of a level 2 tangi. So that's the kaupapa for tonight. And I'll just open us up and then we'll get into it. Mai maranga waka rangona te rangi e tūnei, mai maranga waka rangona te papea takoto ake nei. Mai are waka tupua anaku, mai are waka tupua rangi, e ua e nei ki te pau o te pai pai wao, e tūnei. Turuturu o I te waka maua kia tīna, hui e tāikie. Tāikie kia tātou. Tāikie kia tātou I roto I tēnei rā, I roto I tēnei pō. Me te me I kau atu ki koutou, I roto I ngā tini pā eketanga o te wā. Tēnei waka, tēnei uiu, e pā kautonu ana ki tēnei motu o tātou, tēnei wenu o tātou, me ona wero katoa. Nā reire me I kau atu ana, tēnā koutou kia ora tātou. E tangi ana ki o tātou mate, anā te toko wā I te wā kāinga, I te wikene, kua I pātu nei, Auntie Vera, Auntie Pani, kai te rangatira Thomas, tatu mai ki a koe e te tau, e takutua ine, Karina, e moi koutou. Tatu atu ki ngā mate katoa. Kai te pāpā, ka tai tonu nei, ka rongo I te aotanga ki a koe, e moi. Oe no, e mi ana e tangi ana ki o tātou mate, rātou ki a rātou, e mi ana e tangi ana ki tātou, I roto I ngā tini a o tango te wā. Nā reira tēnā, ui tātou katoa. Kia ora everybody. As I said earlier, tonight is me sharing some learnings after being part of a level 2 tangihanga. And I'm not going to talk about that tangi specifically, but just the learnings that I got from navigating the space, preparing for it, as well as what we would probably do again, what we'd do differently, and what we might not do as well. So hopefully this is going to be helpful for you. I think the key thing to do is to know the rules and don't reinvent the wheel, because there's a heap of people now who have done different things. And so when my cousin passed, I used a pānui from somebody in Hawke's Bay. I used some learnings from iwi up here in Waikato from last year, and then use that as the template to help me to get through, kia ora Erina, to get through doing different things, and then continually updating as we navigate this. So did that, and kia ora Shire. And so I suppose what I want to cover tonight is a couple of things. 1, pānui, 2, times, 3, making sure you've got somebody who can answer questions, who isn't the person who's really busy, and then how we share the load. Kia ora, bro. So the pānui, as I said, don't reinvent the wheel. Look at others, because there have been some good examples, and just use that. I think I used a mixture of different pānui to be able to work out how we would navigate the level 2 stuff. And in addition to that, tueri. In addition to that, had information from the undertaker so that we were working under the most up-to-date details, because when I did my first search, which is typical, the government site wasn't as up-to-date as it should have been. because, it always takes government a long time to respond, even though they know alert level 2 is coming. And part of that's because of waiting for the final decision from Cabinet. But surely you could do some things. And so when I did my Google search when the cousin passed away, and went onto the COVID site, it still had last year's alert level 2 information rather than this year. So make sure you've got the most up-to-date details when you're doing it. The other thing is, as you outline all of the restrictions, that can put people off. So you've got to be mindful that as you do outline the restrictions, that you also tell them, please come. We will make it work. And if anything, if there are too many for one ope, you just let that ope go on, ask the rest to wait in their car, and then once that ope is done, you just have 2 opes in the time slot rather than worrying about waiting for another 2 hours. So one of the cool things was we did have time slots, 9, 11, 1, 3, and it's winter, so we did it that way, whereas in summer, might do them differently, might do them on the even in the morning, 8, 10, 12, and then wait until something different later on. Because as you do those times, it's not that you're not going to let anyone else during those times, but it's an easy way for the paipai and the kitchen to run. I loved it. We have our tangis outside, so it's freezing cold, and we had snow on the hills, we had sleet at the marae and hail, and we have our mate in a ware mate in a tent. So it's freezing, and actually wearing a mask meant that you're breathing in warm air rather than the normal cold air you'd be breathing in. So I think there are a lot of benefits through this COVID tanga. But the other thing is that what we learnt is 9, 11, 12 is by having those dates, there's not as much urgency. So the haukainga weren't getting up to feed their kids when breakfast is due. Well, not the haukainga, but those the 50 that were allowed in the Warepuni, because the rest of us had to go back to our own family homes. We couldn't stay at the marae like we'd normally do it. And so that meant that sometimes kids weren't being fed until whenever. So you've got to work out when you're going to have one main meal for the marae as well. One of the other cool things, and we worked that out on the second day, is that you can then feed your manuhiri a hot meal each time for those set times. So that was cool to be able to do that rather than just a cup of tea, especially when people travel for such a long way. And then the other good learning was that people can then do shifts. And as people do the shifts, it can then make idle hands and idle lips, people moaning or talking about or whatever. However, what I do next time is encourage, okay, during this time and this time, we're going to have a wānanga. And you have your wānanga in front of the tūpāpaku. It's kau te nā kōrero kirungi te tūpāpaku. And when you do that, that then brings the kitchen up so that the kitchen can do a bit of learning, because one day they're going to have to stop staying down there, and it's good to then come up and practice while it's just you at home. The other thing we enjoyed was just having that time to catch up with people, though the challenge with wearing masks is that I didn't realise that some people were at the tangi until a couple of days later. Is that you, so-and-so? When did you get here? They got here on with the tūpāpaku, but just because you can't see anybody with their masks, didn't realise who was who. So some really interesting things. But the key thing I got is it was a really good chance to do some wānanga and to have debriefs as each kai kōrero, as each ope came on. After that, we'd have a debrief. Okay, so what did you hear? What did you learn? And what did they say? What did we say? How would you do that differently? Make sure you position yourself this way instead this time, next time, all of those different things, so that we're continually learning and you're learning on the spot, which helps to embed it better. And then the other thing that I really enjoyed was just the chance to not need to rush. And, you know, because we were living uptown at the house, I'd go down for karakia, face wash karakia, then go home and have a shower because I didn't need to worry about somebody coming on. Just so that you instead of rushing and getting up at 6 a.m. To do all of that stuff, instead you just get up, do what you need to do, and then get down to marae. And it was just a really good chance to not push ourselves. And even though I'm a bit whango, my throat, I'd normally come back from a tangi in winter, usually quite sick, and still a bit whango, but that's an ongoing issue. So I found a heap of learning. There would be some things I'd tweak. We had a really good system at the gate, and we just asked people to wait in their cars, and we went to them. And then, you know, and our two kaitiaki, the kekas, the two keka that were at the gate at the Waharoa, they go to each car, introduce themselves, tell them the tikanga, ask for their details, and then offer them a mask if they needed it. And then explain everything. And then, you know, we encourage them to say to people, if you don't have a kai kōrero, then, but you do have a koha, then just stand up and say, kia ora tātou, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, and lay your koha down. And some would think that that's terrible, whereas I'm of the opinion, pai ake te iti I te kore, pai ake te kore I te kore kore, pai ake te kore kore I te kore rawatu. So, you know, I thought it was beautiful. Saw a couple of examples of that, and I thought, gee, that's great. It's a good start for people. You know, I've been to Wānanga where one of my friends, he teaches, and for people who are at a really basic level, he just gets them to stand up on the marae and say, Te hei mauri ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Finished. Because it's just getting through that process of saying that. And so I adopted that for those that aren't speakers, just so that it helps them to go through part of the process. The other thing that was really good was, because you're limited by numbers, 100 and 100, is what we did is we made sure that we limited those going from the marae to the urupa, and then said to others, meet us at the urupa. In this case, the marae urupa. She laid at one marae and then went to the other marae to be buried. And so that was a really neat way of managing numbers, but allowing people to still be there to do the thing that they needed to do. And it was beautiful. The other thing I'd probably encourage going forward is having more microphones or something so that it's clearer for those online, because we had our own Zoom going, and so people could link into that throughout the whole tangi. And then as they did that, sometimes people would just join in and just catch up with each other. And then people would be showing from the tent out to the manuhere, some closer to the paipai showing, just so that you could get different angles. And then the day after the tangi, it was still on, and I know about 4 people got in for 7 a.m. karakia, a couple of them from Australia, a couple of them here. And then they did their own karakia. And so all of that gives a chance for people to do things. My final point, which I really, really loved, because it was so hard for people not to be there, is you've got to make things as normal as possible. And so I know in Ngāti Pimpama and Brisbane and in Perth and other places, families were coming together to go through the process to help to help each other grieve. And then they had their own mihi and karakia and that. Then they joined in with the Zoom karakia and kōrero. But what I loved the most is they then did their own hakari on the funeral day as well. So that you're making the experience as normal as possible. And in doing that, it helps Wakanoa to go through the process that we would normally do to help us grieve. So all of these different things have been amazing learnings that I thought I'd share with everybody tonight. Nā reira e mihi atu ana, mindful that it's Mahuru Māori and Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. And koinei te rā, it was today that the petition was delivered to Parliament all those years ago. Nā reira e mihi kau atu ana ki te Māori o tō tātou reo. Māna tātou uitiki, ki te whakapakari i tātou no, ki te ata kōrero, ki te ata wānanganga. I tēnei mea te reo, kia rāngora nuitia, uri no i te motu nei. So just sending a big mihi out to everybody that's trying, even if it's just kia ora, or whether you're trying to pronounce a person's name correctly, like my name. It's not Māori, but everybody mispronounces my name. They'll call me Shay, like sheep, but it's Che, like chocolate. And even when I tell people, then they completely don't listen anyway and just say what they want to say. So the same goes with Te Reo Māori. Encourage you to learn how to say people's names properly, learn how to say the names of towns and places properly, rivers, mountains, etc., because we then respect the origin of those names and the depth of meaning behind those names. Ka ti ake, that's enough. Sending a big mihi to everybody, heaps of love. E tangi tonu ana ki o tātou ma te katoa, tēnei kāmi i atu, tēnā koutou. Kia wakairea ki ngā kupu ki te tā nui, o rangi nui e tui o nei, e rongo wakairea ki kironga ai, turuturo i te uka maua kia tīna, hui e, tai ki e kia tā.